This morning then, we looked at the need to prepare our mind from now for this period that remains until our life ends. So to do so, we need to initially recognize that death is certain, and that when death comes, whilst our body will be left behind, our mind will continue to our next body, our next life. And when death comes, we will continue either to remaining in the higher realms as we are now, or fall into the lower realms. Wherever one takes rebirth, whether it's in the high realms as a human or a god, or in the lower realms as an animal or an unseen being, where one takes rebirth is a result that therefore comes about in dependence on causes. And if it's a virtuous or wholesome cause, it will lead to a wanted result, a result of being born in the high realms. But if it's an unwholesome or non-virtuous cause, it will lead to a suffering result, a result of rebirth in the lower realms. And whether a cause is virtuous or non-virtuous depends on the mind. If the mind is wholesome or virtuous, then the resulting physical behavior and speech will also be virtuous. And therefore, virtuous causes will be created. But if the mind is afflicted, dominated by anger, attachments, and so forth, then from the non-virtuous mind follows a non-virtuous speech and physical behavior, and in this way we accumulate non-virtuous causes. And when should they ripen as the propelling imprint at the time of death, it can only lead to rebirth in the lower realms. So we've now concluded looking at the faults of not being mindful of one's death. Now we come to look at the benefits of being mindful of one's death.
Mebra tones and della seba dojing, Donwa la soba gwene, Nimbo lendu, Parcella rangi, Jumataras.
So turning to the text in the handout, it's near the bottom of page 91, and in the published book, near the top of page 81. I've just made some changes to the translation a few lines in. If a genuine mind recollecting death arises, as with most people, when they are convinced they will die in the next few days, then even in those with only a little understanding of Dharma, upon seeing that they will be unaccompanied by friends and relatives, their craving for them will naturally be reversed. And the wish to extract the essence of their life by way of giving and so on will easily arise.
내 지워진 비그 남아시키나 나 내가 넘기네다 시주그래 그디시 내가 요 말에 선비게 되니게 삼로다 야고시 삼로냐 개와 인당 삼 넘기니네 삼 땅고나시고로 지워진 비로 남아시키바나 남아선로 야고시고로 부이다고로 기기 요바 나시고다.
First part, if a genuine mind recollecting death arises. So this is where one has gained certainty in one's death, as well as certainty that it is clear to one that the time and manner of one's death, though, is uncertain and thereby can come at any point. So if one has a genuine recollection of death with regard to those two aspects,
다 되네게 삼로 주여바이나 넘기네 삼로 땅기여바이나 안에 가려용고래서나 베나 디링사랑 디링상랑 치워라 타쳐바나 베나가서 내바라졌다 디링다 상이디와 시설의 선배게다 타쳐바로시 시설의 삼선을 소소 삼 코여바이나 단 안에 가르치기를 쳐바나 안에 가르치기를라나 단 최제에게 삼로도 코그레스 거다.
Continues, as with most people, when they are convinced they will die in a few days, in the next few days. So this is then been likened, if one has a genuine understanding that of the certainty of one's death and the uncertainty of its time, one's attitude would be similar to someone with an incurable disease who recognizes they really are at the very end of their life and that death will certainly come within the coming days. So one has a similar clarity about one's death.
타치바나 디네 안삼나 가르고 그랬으니 취유고와 고와 텐튠주 여바 연체라 취유고와도 배 야구 신번데 되네게 야구를 된주 야구라 시라 마신 뛰어서 오식자 베네 먼저 취 뛰어신 바다 되네게다 야 아니 개와 치마 케일렌바다 개와 안지게 아니 야 권조다 상예다 야 대바 여바 되네게 지게 최제다 되어서 신바이나 아니 고와 텐튠시는 고와 되어서 여바는 배 뿌이다고 했는데 야구로 와 되면야 최 고와 텐튠 고 되어서 여바이나 나 가르치게서는 되네게 신바이나 되네게 가르치는 년라소바 조수 매버 토니스 데라 세바 도진지다 되게 저게 다 시도도 갑라 년디게 봐 분야다 년 수가리나 대수 많이도 치주에 매봐 시와라 까투고 매봐 판도 매봐디 하고 고래스 제자 하고 요데 아니 델이야 아니 차와지기 말해서 세바 도진 차와지기 말 당도 차와지기 말해서
So this Lama Tsongkhapa starts out by making a comparison as saying that someone who has, through meditation, a genuine understanding of the certainty of their death, but the uncertainty of its time, is being likened then to someone who's severely ill and knows that they have reached the end of their life and that their death is at most a day or perhaps two away. So the first, the instance, a genuine mind refers to someone who's cultivated this attitude through meditation. And then it continues, then even in those with only a little understanding of Dharma. So this refers to those who have not studied and reflected in much detail, but they have a sincere faith in the three jewels. They accept that reincarnation. So therefore they know that with the ending of their life, they will be reborn. So with just such a general Buddhist attitude, not one that has been cultivated through intense years-long study and meditation. So for even such a person, upon seeing that they will be unaccompanied by friends and relatives, their craving or their attachment for them will naturally be reversed.
안델에 세바 도지 데네 가르치 그랬으네 동화로 소비고 거네 인보 렘버 되베스 제가 인보 렘버 되 렌데 87 랑게 중화다 랑게 중화다서 제가 데네 소수기 데네게 지게 유치라로 변조했네 야 권절에 처부피야 안시엘이야 진바다야로 소바나 개와주에게데 당아 시조사데 시나다 제송 지게 년 분야의 차선 취해가야 말이나다 제설이야 차바께나 판도면바전 데레야 랑기 안데 개와 강도 건조라 겸로 제야다 안소수기 년고를需要라서 바데네게 개와 제야데 코르스 랑슈글리그레스 난게 중그레스 걸
And so yeah, well, that then regular or the way they've been thinking throughout their life now will be naturally reversed. And the wish to extract the essence of their life by way of giving and so on will easily arise. So what we saw just before with craving for them will naturally be reversed. So they won't need to intentionally bring about won't intentionally need to stop their attachment towards their loved ones because they recognize their impending death. Similarly, they will naturally, or what will also easily arise, is the determination to accumulate virtue now that they know this life is about to end. So therefore, the wish to extract the essence of this life, in other words, to fulfill this life's potential, for these final hours or days of this life, through giving, perhaps giving away their possessions, through making offerings to the three jewels or to their family, this will easily arise. Their attachment to their valued possessions no longer will bind them, but they will readily give.
난 지단행한 저기 최케랭해지나 수이나 되는 거로 소소 강아체다 시에다 되게 강아시고 체력값이야 소소 권조된지 권조를 몰람자다 되게 네 계획 지금 권조를 겹수르게 겸로게다 삼로된 게다 계획자와 도스 리거가 지나시는 난 되게 다 최기 니수를 좀 뿌이다 보러 지체 야고 냠는 지인들 딜레 숙셰리고라 이나다 최기 내상으로 즉시 야고 마신베네 최케림바다 안데지 중세지가 하고 베네야 안데 강아 체야다 시야다 되는 소소 년아가 레어도 소소게 안지게 권초에 전파다 될래 접수 좋아라서 받아 안데 도시네 소소게다 지 권초에 최고표라서 도시네 삼로디 고랑 한게 수ski 연구로 와서다.
It's quite common though for people, whether religious or not, that when they are in grave danger, when they're faced with imminent death, that they will turn their mind to those in whom they trust, whether that's as a Buddhist towards the three jewels or a non-Buddhist towards the God in which they trust. This is quite common, quite ordinary when faced with grave danger in time, especially if the mind is in a sense of desperation.
따라서데 다도 디나신 당한 지게 남균이야 안지게 개와치마 켈렘바다 데네 치주고레 선배 치워제 다 남징해봐 요 말에 선배 데네게 삼다진 당바이나 아니 시디급라 아니 패디 제상 대신 쇼가 슈바나징한서 코라다 년다 관계자는 님도 치줘야 요 말에 매바데 세자 제주기 시원에 가토야 말에 시니네 염도 치료하는 가임에 다 규절하다 변조하다 되네나 차상샤는 조고로 와서 되네인자 다란지 시리급로 줘야 돼 캐줘야 돼 아니 개회 저까지 죽투베나 다디 염도 캐줘야 요래 섬제 온도시나 삼로 거잖아 가지 와서는 년고라 소비게 지진 최기기 칠 배바 탐지 님보 매버로 통해 예죄를 도진 점로다 추짐로 소바 레 상보 소베 너 고방 담바 라니 제데 너 조안 남잔 데르 치베나 델레 된체와 지주여스 지주여스.
So this is similar to what we looked at this morning, that when So in this case, it's a person, when they're facing their death, either, as we see some of the genuine mind recollecting death, so they would have cultivated a mind sometime before, but others it may have come only now, when their demise is imminent, that they will recognize that their loved ones and their dear friends cannot accompany them, and their cherished possessions, they cannot be taken either. They all have to be left behind. And then Lama Tsongkhapa continues, and upon seeing that all efforts made for the sake of such worldly concerns as material gain, honor, and so on are futile, they will desist from faulty behavior. In such a way, they will accumulate the good karmas of going for refuge, ethics, and so forth, by means of which they will ascend to a holy state and lead sentient beings there too. What is more meaningful than this?
Dizu ne je chabe wondo so ada shen ya an ji rang le due na ga wa da mian na mi ga wa la so ba sam ta wa ne cha dang yo wondo song go wa ji san de ne ge sam thon ne le ga che ba di da ning bo yo ma des ning bo me ba thong go ga san da so so le ning go chi chung ba na ya bo le ga na ma chung ba na an de le ya ma ga wa ye da la so ba chi ne an ju ge da le ga che di pe na an ju ge chi shen le ro ba che ba na 소소야 되어가야 소소야 담년다 여기 돈다 섬다로 제베네 데디 최샤고 말와 그래서 차베 원도 송 진짜 판도야고 용어만 최샤고 말 되게 땅제 되는 연구 대 되어가다 마다와다 될이야 이게 네 스컬소리 이마지베네 아주 오단 야 날 되어가 담보서 이 야고 제베네 수야고 지금인데 선야 줘라야 되 용거로 봐 제가 아주 가상 개와다 디바 제마지 고레세디 들어와 지상 짐바데 개발해 되나 군농 차베 원도 봐다 군노디 미개와 차되어 봐 지상 개발 야보셔고 말와 디네자다 게디싱에 봐요 말 시번에 타쳐 봐데 시와데 패패데 최디마도 요 말에서 삼당 야보치 냠는 디네 삼당의 집에나 다 디네기 바 직제반네 미셸레 짐바 땅와이나 저 로제바이나다 소소리아 담년다 야야다 아데디 판도요 말 담년다 요번 담년다 같이 치면데 시르네 판도요 말 제도요 말아 와서 제사도 그 시르도 패하면 제 담년다디에 패하면 제사를 떼봤다 떼가 쉬고 땅바이네 디기 시르네 가이 패하면 말 제사 제송네 개와 치마 안에 디기 주에 팽교 말에 개와 치마 원료 고반 팽교 말에 삼제 되네게 돈에 안에 될이야 안에 닝보메가 통고래 예제 닝보메가 통하제네 도시네 돈에는 안디 가르쳐 버렸으면 예발에 독증 세대 제사 되네게 닝보 통에다 내가를 제대 다 죄바 차단기 죄바래 주군로 죄바 차단기 죄바의 가능도 룡아 죄바냐 예제들이 봐 가고래 예제
Looking at the first part, and upon seeing that all efforts made for the sake of such worldly concerns as material gain, honor, and so on are futile, they will desist from faulty behavior. So this person then, with a genuine mind recollecting death, when the end of their life comes, they will easily be able to let go of all that they are still grasping at, because they'll recognize that expressions of the eight worldly concerns have no essence. There is no need to be concerned about one's reputation, about whether people in the past have praised one or disparaged one, or in the future will do so, because one is about to leave this life. Moreover, one's possessions, which now one is ready to give, one will no longer be craving for them or attached to them very strongly, but will readily give them. One will not be having thoughts that perhaps one had before of wanting to sell them and get a good price and being upset when they do not get a good price. They will recognize now that such desires have no essence. There is no value to desiring financial gain or profit or being praised, one's reputation. So the person then will readily be able to let go of all that they clung to so, and thereby they'll be able to give with an excellent motivation, a motivation that is free of attachment. And in this way, they'll create great stores of merit by letting go and giving without clinging.
Sovala soba yamne jibi le sangpo sogri ese jisan konjo soma japso duwe jamro che da jisan da koyu dunga tada le gyobi nubari suli yorasana jamne konjo soma yore ese be yishi che dam jamne konjo soma gyomore ese be yishi che dine samne jamro ge lapcha ma sonsha de lunga yisu nyecho tembe tsurim sonya dige dan jimbe nyamne chebe nyam zunri nyamne cheba de sonsha ba za ndiso ya ne lunga nyecho tembe tsurim sonya ane jimbataya sebe nyamne cheya dus chene dene dele ane koale tube tarba toyage komya da dene jam nije komya janju sem komya la soba dene komya de dene le sambo so go re dene le sambo so se dene ge gewa tu yong res dene ge gewa tu ba sa go ban dan ba rani che de se de so so ge dus nyamne je de dene so so rang ge go ban dan ba se de 가서 소수규라 냠네 야야 조아제네된 원료 고마 토야다 탈벽 고마 토야다 탐지기 고마 토바디 도시의 연구를 해서 지리도 고마 담바라니 있어야 돼서
In such a way, they will accumulate the good karmas of going for refuge, ethics, and so forth. So that, and so forth would include then the generosity that's already been mentioned, but specifically ethics is being mentioned as well as refuge. Because with death, with the understanding that one's death is imminent, one's mind will naturally turn towards the three jewels, and one will open one's mind to them. The trust arising, or the faith or the trust arising from within will be sincere and heartfelt. And one will take care of one's mind knowing that one's death is imminent. One will ensure that one's mind is ethical. In other words, it's restrained from coming under the influence of the afflictions. And in this way, the generosity that will have been practiced will have been largely free of the afflictions, and thereby excellent virtue will be accumulated. One taking care of one's mind is likely to be patient, not getting annoyed or frustrated at what's happening, but taking great care of one's mind, knowing that right now one's preparing for one's imminent death and wants to ensure that one transitions from this life to the next with as good a quality mind as possible. So in this way, they will accumulate the good karmas of going for refuge, ethics, and so forth, by means of which they will ascend to a holy state. And the holy state then would refer to one of the three goals of the Dharma, that depending on the practitioner, they would either have their mind set on achieving a further good rebirth, or if they have further education and have an understanding of liberation or enlightenment, they will have the progression towards such a goal as arising within them as their desired next, or their hope for next destination, or to be in this continued direction. And holy state, and lead sentient beings there too. So if they have some understanding of bodhicitta, then as their death is approaching, they will at least be trying to generate this kind of outlook of aspiring to have another good rebirth, so that they can continue their progression for the sake of others. So these kinds of excellent motivations will be cultivated as death approaches.
다 소소라는 데니게 냠nen제 수식이 냠용 데니게 더 수식교라 또배 냠nen 데니게 어디 안데 데니게 소소라는 게 냠용 토네 闲来呀电解闲呀安心间先把这个呢呀东亚西亚的地区这个给我起码我就国防他们没有国防投来了呀去呀今天安的呀这个特别国防电别个2年来人把电解特别了去呀今天啊这特别前边咱们这老说把将有什么老说把年米数连把把工作把拉接今天特别前边咱们去现在呀上有国防去的用过的这些现在就是那这里呀rowa namkyan deri TBS, jisan rowa namkyan deri TBS, susu rarangin nyamlen jine, sheba nashin je shanlaya pa, ten, ane ngondio kobon toya, yu sa ju kondo, ngondio ko kiwa chima ngondio kobon toya da. Tene ane kondo liya, tarbi lam nyamlen rinpa ten, ane tarbi ki kobon chi je tarba toya da. Tene jam nije, susu ki nyamlen jeba nashin jine, jamba da nije, diyo kom nyamlen je ju jen, janshu sim ye ju ya, san yu kobon la tiba chi go res. Tene tiba jeba nza, dele da denda chewa chi yoma, dele duen chewa chi chi yus, da dele pando duye ke pando chewa chi yoma res, jisang soso rang ki nyamlen chi, soso yunga siya dan digi dhubya, ngon diyo goba toya, tarba da tamche kienpyo goba, janshu senpi ke nyamlen rinpa di ke chea di, da dengi dewa tobi gyu di ke che sago warwa, soso samtangwe. Da shenlaya soso ki nyamnyo tone sheba, shenlaya pa dengi, shenlaya pando duya di, xianyang digil gugu warwa xiang, jizang de dele duanda chewa jik gaya yo marwa xiong, dele duan chewa jishi yos.
The final part of the sentence, and lead sentient beings there too. This references an aspiration that may well arise in this person as they are approaching their death. They will have this, depending on the training they have engaged in their life, if they have an understanding of what it means to be a bodhisattva, how one becomes a bodhisattva, and the great benefits of being a bodhisattva, this aspiration will arise to have a further excellent rebirth so they can lead others to attain the state freed of suffering. So these kinds of minds will arise within the person. Or if they haven't received much teachings and engaged in reflection on these topics, then perhaps they have in terms of individual liberation, and then such thoughts will arise. So this comes about in dependence on one's own prior training, and thereby one can apply oneself to these ways of thinking, have them dominant within oneself, even as one nears the end of one's life, and one's faculties start to weaken. And moreover, especially if we imagine being in a position where one is surrounded by others, the person, as they are preparing for their death, is likely to give heartfelt advice, and giving heartfelt advice. And this will be what they recognize is of great meaning, of real value. So this would be the time when they'd want to give advice to their surrounding friends and loved ones about what truly is important, to let go of all the meaningless activities, but rather to focus on what has true value. So in this way, they'll be able to give benefit to others, even at the very end of their life. And they may even request for recitations of texts or guided meditations they are familiar with, so as to help guide their mind. And in this way, they would attain benefit, as would those around them. So thinking in this way, we can see, as the text continues, what is there more meaningful than this? So having cultivated or prepared well, then oneself can leave from this life in a good way, and can have a positive impact on others too.
chiwa tempa, chiwa gombegi, ane penyo res, jibu res, chiwa gomba le tende disu yungo res. Jizan che di zamgi, nyingo la sopa chabegi, chadang la sopa disu ya, chadang doya digi ya, ane chiwa tempa le tende yungo res. Jizan chiwa tembegi, penyo tende disu ya saji. Tadiso chiwa tembegi, penyo res yoro. Chiwa tempa le gombegi, penyo tende disu yungo res saji. Penyo zina jibu se yoro, wada bai jibu. chiwa tempa kombege da tebo den siungre ese.
What's been described here, thus, is the first benefit of cultivating mindfulness of death. So a benefit is a result that, such as we see described here, as the way that one may, who's trained well, will leave from this life. If one trains well from now in being mindful of death, one will actually live what remains of one's life in this manner. In other words, just like someone leaving this life well, one will actually live the entirety of what remains of this life well. One's mind will naturally be turned towards the three jewels. One will be open and receptive to the three jewels. One's trust in them will be sincere. And moreover, one's attainment of a particular Dharma goal, whether it's an excellent rebirth or progression towards liberation or even enlightenment, the attainment of that goal is what one will value first and foremost, not the attainment of meaningless pleasures or overcoming insignificant problems. One will live one's life focused on achieving meaningful goals. So this benefit, this result, comes about through successfully cultivating a mindfulness of death.
How go and they get him that get you draw that thank you, do you think you made that get you draw as a cagati tanta, and the draw or SMP, get you draw on a tender yomares sometime. And then they draw or get you draw or tender yomares and big, never yomares sometime to done, somebody do cover in and you get Garchigres in there, and draw a get diddy, Pani Drodu Kablanga, the Kiwaya Jala Karakarioba, and Chasaji. Saya to yare, and Toson Tire, Dulo, the Karaku in a Chikia, where the Riki Karaku, but the Desi. That is an that Chigam Lord Nisum Jelma, the dog mothers, think you and the watching Maran, and that is your Lojama Jen that is Mudwa. Says and Kidi Drogo attend your mother, Kidi Shoal and the Hawaii Marsman, and Lamsa, Nassans and the Desi. Says not do she draw the summer tongue. Gidi draw your marring ever than the yomars and some night, and so Karikar to go in the Chala, the Kishan, Dedication, part Dedication, by them. Then Gidi don't know draw your roach, the Gangakuni meeting at Chagorwa, and the Negige. And they draw Imbajilaya, and ya draw Mohoy, Tupsitanji, draw Mohoy, draw Kugu or Gidi drawing ever yomar in it, did draw Mohoy, Tupsitan, Yobaina, how go by now, Tupsitanji, draw Mohoy, Tupsitan, at Yorwada. Didn't draw Koyache, and then get you draw never in how didn't it is to say what how gonna and the Dedicia, the carriage dinner, Dedicia in the draw back and much of a chungorwa. Then the nigger draw in the draw you some of my horror dinner, and it draw Karaka kill the Dedicia, Dedigina Chico Mara. Dedi Majidun, that draw to love the old Dangaji, it's Haman, eats Haman, and Ajala did dinner Ganga shoes legal on be dinner she. Nanzulia, she the she go over what on it. She said, she has some dana and madara and she to war what. She said, Dinner Zada, or the she go over it, dedicating ever your martas some time, and then she neck how to really do. And I saw that you want to go about to Nima, the woman go to Resi. Then when I saw you like a dinner, that had me go out to Lanza, didn't I do sin and dig you to your that had me dig you to your wasm. She's not that when you go about to a goodie, but. That in order, Dedici, that is a Kava Yungorba. The name is that Dedi Garcia was in it, Lunga is to the children so a lot about Zimba, the Savinian, Jebati, Yamlan Jayumruba. The name is that the Niggy Gudisa to war, Chiwa Jemba Ina, Chiwa Jemba, and Namching Ema Samba Ina, and then Kiwa Chima Dragida, Yapuchi Hadi, and you get Daily Masona that in the Chitu war, yes.
An analogy would be if one were to be told that there's a particular journey you have to embark on, a particular destination you have to arrive at, and that you have to go. There is you have no say in the matter. But as to when you are going, this is not clear. But you need to be ready to go at a moment's notice. Here, when one is told this, then if one accepts that fully, the natural next step would be, let me prepare. Because I don't know when I have to go, but I do know I do have to go. So let me prepare so I'm ready at a moment's notice. Then one will prepare well for one's journey, knowing then the journey will not be challenging, it will go well. And whenever one needs to go, one will be ready. So this would be a sensible approach. Another approach would be to be told that you have to go on a particular journey at an unspecified time, and to say, well, very interesting, and put it out of your mind. Not think about it, go on as if you had never heard this. But then, when the time comes, when you are told, now you have to depart, suddenly you'll be scrambling, but you will not be able to prepare. It will then be too late. Similarly, if you're told you have to go, and that it's certain you have to go, but you don't know when, and you rather place your mind on, oh, how can I possibly get out of going? What are the various tricks I can play to get out of going? The time to prepare will also be wasted. So this analogy then links to what we have here, that we all have to die, and the time of our death is uncertain. So the first points are to recognize this, to recognize the certainty of our death, and that it is not something that can be indefinitely delayed. And when that time comes to go, it is time to go. And when we die, there are only two directions one can go in. Either remaining in the high realms or falling to the lower realms. There are only those two directions. And it's not a choice we get to make. It's something that the karma we have accumulated in this life projects. So therefore, when the time comes, when we exhale from this body for the final time, the next rebirth will be determined for us by the karma that we create. It's not something that we can will into existence. We have to create the causes. Recognizing this then leads to a determination to prepare well for what inevitably lies before us and ensure that the onward journey is one that is comfortable and we arrive at a desired destination.
Samlo yagar down to Vena, Chizan Chiwa Jan, Shi Rure, Namching Eva Yomaris and some time, and then all this some didn't she read Shiwa di and it chig Garichin Shiwa resident, led on Yomo around by Shitu. Did she egg doeg, tablam yore Yomarson, or tablam yore do it. Then Garichas di le Yomo Papango race, Chizan Yomo Papamba ina, that Meva Yomo Pasha, Yomo on the Rawambi Chiwa the Yumbares. Dina is that Yomo Paya to Nalaya, yet the nature to be children so yadine, and Jimbe Yamleja dinner dame about to be shut up. Nito dinner, Desocomchen, and Yomo Nipotian, Yomo Papa Pang to a child, Tarbico water, Ligorba, Indosian. And dinner Ajik dinner some danger that she drew, she never answered that the tender yet, Tanima to Mary, Chesa dinner is that Ranima, Shansim Jatamji body, Chesa, Shansim Jatamji in a Digi Yawachima, Mansola Gimoche, and Dendral Gaget, Gihudu, Chesa Ding and Zangi, Consulia, Tablam Chigis, Consulpa, Shanlia, Robache, Shanley, Shan Yutuma Seada, and Shanley Digi to Yagi, some don the Jam Nijile Gorva, near Kumgorva, Chesa Digi and Jenan, Yes and Jam Nijuayada, Did Honan, Shanlia, Namely Jimba, Shanley Pando Juya, and the Dimaza, Shansim Jatamje, and the Ding Yukovi. Leda Numo round Yawatile Tarchin and Tarva Topo to Delia, Will Simpe, Shalia, Pando Juvia, Nondusine, Jamni Jocomiata, Jajusim, Dizangi Shala Pando Juvia, Chido Simjatam Jud, San Yokoba Topo Simpe, some to get those get church down. 도시네 치와 미다와 덴제 치와 미다와 덴비 긴지 삼로 총화치 땅에도 개와치면 원요고 마토야 규사도야 내래 삼로도 자체르시아 땅에도 네 탈비고 마토야 규사야 띵유 코와레 레다뉴 코와레 개와데 균에 빵야다 안디 안델레야 자체르단도 랑치고 마예 셈젠 탐제 안야 띵이 되어 토베야레 베수치야도 용거래 세지 디체사자 디수차사 디네시 용거 된자 치와 덴비기 곰비기 팽연 지구차고래 세디 송거
In this meditation on the impermanence of our life, some questions we will need to look at is, why is it that death comes why is it that death will come for me? And do I have any control over when my death comes? And do I have any control over where my rebirth will be? We recognize that we cannot will into existence a long and healthy life. We cannot will into existence an excellent rebirth, because we do not have control over our death and our rebirth. It is something determined by the karma we have accumulated and the afflictions on our continuum. Recognizing the role that our afflictions and our contaminated karma plays in our approaching death, we will come to recognize in particular these afflictions as a grave enemy. It's the afflictions on our own continuum that have led to all our non-virtuous karma being accumulated, as well as our virtuous karma being contaminated. And therefore, we develop a deep determination to develop minds which are contrary to the afflictions, virtuous minds. In particular, those that will lead to a further good rebirth, such as ethics, generosity, patience, joyous perseverance. We will make aspirational prayers for ongoing excellent rebirths where we reconnect with the Dharma and continue our spiritual journey. And if we've had further education and come to understand what the root cause that keeps us bound within the self-created samsaric existence, come to understand that it is our own ignorance of self-grasping, we'll recognize that it is that affliction that we need to eradicate. And the way to eradicate is to cultivate the directly contrary mind, the antidote, the wisdom that realizes emptiness, or the wisdom that realizes selflessness. So then, with that understanding, we'll strive that in addition to cultivating ethics, generosity, and so forth, we'll also cultivate wisdom. And if we've come to recognize that, it's particularly when we've come to recognize that it's our afflictions, in particular our ignorance, that keeps us bound in samsara, and we've come to recognize that wisdom is the antidote, and we have the capacity to cultivate wisdom within us. So therefore we have confidence that I can achieve liberation. I can achieve liberation. We are then in the ideal situation to lift our gaze and ask a further question. Is this predicament of uncontrolled death and rebirth something that is somehow unique to me? And we readily recognize that all other fellow ordinary mother sentient beings are in the same position as I am, bound within self-created samsara due to their own afflictions and contaminated karma, and keep taking rebirth after rebirth without any control or freedom. And this then, when we recognize that others are in the same position as us, we can utilize this to generate love and compassion, genuine love and compassion. Love being the wish, may all beings, whomever they are, abide in lasting happiness. And compassion is a genuine wish. May all beings, whoever they are, abide free of suffering and pain. We can develop this further to a genuine wish to help others and guide them in this most important of ways, help them recognize that they are bound in samsara, but they can gain liberation or freedom from samsara. So these are the three goals of the Dharma, either striving for an excellent rebirth, or for liberation for oneself, or to become a Buddha for the sake of others. And the stronger we have cultivated an awareness of our death, with it in terms of both its certainty and uncertainty, certainty of death and the uncertainty of the time of the death, this will give us a strength of mind to easily let go of our attraction to the pleasures of this life and our aversion to the insignificant problems of this life, and rather apply our mind consistently to the Dharma. This means, as we are starting to train, we'll genuinely develop a wish to cultivate ethics, generosity, and so forth, so that we have the causes for an excellent rebirth. And as we train further, we'll genuinely give rise to an understanding that it's my afflictions with ignorance at the root that I have to eradicate. And I have the capacity to do so, and thereby we give rise to a yearning for liberation from samsara. And thirdly, independence on that, we'll be able to generate sincere bodhicitta. So these are the benefits that come from the meditation on impermanence of life, or being mindful of our death.
That is be the make young artists and Yangan de Chinles, Shimowa Tamjige Nana, Dunji Lodo Chok, and Jay Tamjige Nana, Balangi Jay Chok, Chokos, the Ne Dushe Tamjige Nana, Midabada, Chiwi Dushe Cho in the Didakini, Kamsum Yu, Debada, Maribada, Naja Tamje, Sel Laws, She Sung Sauce, She Sauce.
Lama Tsongkhapa continues. That is why it is also praised with many analogies, and then he quotes from the Buddha, from the great final Nirvana Sutra. Among all ploughings of the fields, the ploughing in autumn is the best. Among all footprints, the elephant's footprints are the best. Among all perceptions, those of impermanence and death are the best. They eliminate all the desire, ignorance, and pride of the three realms.
That Denigi Mitaba some Damaina and the Chiva Mitaba in some Damaina that they to Gamro Semja that Sutum that Denigi lay some society Yungdu was in that bed to me, Jan, San Yusung, bed to me, that young Yandig to Nalba, Shimoa, Shimoa Tamji, Nani, Dunyu Loto Chogo, said Shimba Digi by legal don't do the legal, don't do Yakshu Gidil, Dungali or Dungali or the Yakshu that Matab Chana Chitus and the Yahoo Marat, Dungalia Debo to the mean Jedi, Yanzulia, Nuba, Nuba, Bejuba, the Chagor, which is a Shimo, the Gilead, Jay, Debu Yashu, the Gidilios, Dungali or a Dunguloto Cho, Yashu, said Chokos. Dinajina to the that Bene. That chip Bajo, da Rada, Luda, Denigi, Chikangba, Simjin, that da loss of a Lambuche loss of attention, Gangbi, Chishu did that, because the Lambuchi is on Chishu is. That is a Pisha, or rather, Dendo Mangugan and that Dunga, Tibuyashi, the Gidilios, the Dungali or is. The name J. Simjan, J. Nana, J. Chishu did that, Lambuchi is. G. Gangje. Gangji na Langbuchi Gangji the Chishu is or the Gangbuchi.
When Lama Tsongkhapa writes, that is why it is also praised with many analogies. It, of course, refers to the benefits of cultivating mindfulness of death. In the first line, among all ploughings of the field, the ploughing in autumn is best. Farmers wanting to achieve the best result or fruition from their field, they will know that the best time to plough is autumn, because that is the best time to ensure excellent results. And secondly, among all footprints, the footprints of all beings that walk, whether humans or cows and so forth, the greatest would be, or the biggest, would be that of the elephant.
This is doing now the Singapore doing law choice that Yamaki. 지다시 오래 된 투셰제라 근데 아직 돈도 기디나 야고 주한 지호로 되네 멤버체 지단이 봐 아주 신발답되죠. 지단 땡기 가서다 마야게 가서 마다위도 야 춘춘셔지도 제보를 뛰어서야 돼. 이내 대수 살로야다 판도 가요 말어. 땡가서 제보 시장 민제 되네 차상 뉴바도 마선 차상 예대 봐서 신 주대 템버 사야도 로야게 차상 배주 체여래자 초들이 해야 돼. 나 심지는 강제로 준다는 건 da chu mesel barona da chigi duwa ba bene rada luda ganjen chu tix ko ne chi benj beje sha ta to ya marwa langbo chige ganjen be chenbo yo za dinan ba chu le de ne ane chu di beje da de yo wa cha dinan ne dinan shin langbo chige je na je de ganjen ne che sho de ya sho de che sho de sa da odi be de cha de ne dinan shin da ga so samlo na da ji so be che 다 삼로 나네 삼로 코로나 두시에 삼다는데 두시 탐지게 나네 미다바다 미다바 삼다나 치위 두시의 약쇼를 해서 그래 미다바 두시다 치위 두시 삼다데 두시의 약쇼를 해서
This was taught by the Buddha, so it's very relevant to the society at that time. So farmers had very limited tools. Certainly they wouldn't have had fertilizer or hothouses to try and help grow their crops at various times of years. So they would be very dependent on the time of year, on weather. So the best time for them to plant would be in autumn. And the second illustration refers to the elephant's footprint, which is seen as the best because it's the deepest and the largest. So it's unlike any other footprint. So these are some illustrations of the external world. And then in the third line, moving to the inner world, or the third and fourth line, moving to the inner world. Among all perceptions, those of impermanence and death are the best. So the reflection on both the impermanence of this life, so being mindful of death, as well as impermanence in general, is the best of reflections.
제사다 두시에 나네 미다비 두시에서 오당은 저 끼지 지고 딱바 템보 요 말에서비다 끼지 지고를 지비기 삼로 다야다. 대단에 지기 도신당은 냄지시 치주그래게 제선비게 삼다야디 다도 삼다야디 인바나 두시기 초 두시에 나네 두시 초리에서 난 인자 네 인비 김제 가르서 다 대다기 안에 감숨기 되바다 마릭바다 나예셀로스 제사 미다베 두시에다 치위기 두시에 삼다와디게 텔레테네 아주게 되베 되차당고 안에 되바다 수다 수미기 되차디게 마빠야다 마릭바빠야 나야디게 마빵투고 세투고레스 제솔레테네 안스디 빵빠야게 루시 용고레제레 셀로스
When one reflects on death, that would be in the way of described. And impermanence, one applies to almost everything that exists, recognizing that it does not last. In fact, it doesn't even last a moment. It changes moment by moment. Nothing lasts. And then so too will this body and this life. It will not last, but will come to an end. And further, and then as a great benefit of the reflection on impermanence and on death, the fourth line, they eliminate all the desire, ignorance and pride of the three realms. So here too, the meditation on impermanence and on death is praised because it's through this meditation that one will develop the skills and the quality within to deal with our afflictions.
미다베 두시에다 치위에 삼다여도 나가서 대시 셰바나신 다지게 따바 템보 매바섬도 나가서 남긴데 나가서야 그디나 따바로 삼나 지리고로 바다 지에 메딩에서지 나가서 삼나나 그리고스나 가르서 냐마네 유디에 가상아요 아니 그 로가마야 나이지 나 로가마레데 참자 조연 지시신세 시시고로 바다 디 롱가마기 미디나 다데 미디 직바레베선 직바 말와다 이나다 나가서 삼나나 가서 다데 대유게 미디 롱아마 요래 삼디고 와다 디딱봐 녀마 랑게 미데 다가랑 유와 마르제 나데 바도 레드베 여바르시 섬고래 디딱봐 딱선시고래 제가 두신 미타바 섬도데 녀마게 롱아메디 코 지사레도 요마레 코 마지선 디 균치마로제 니바시 끼지끼지 지네 균치마치마 레데마도 나마 다가랑데 마레 섬베 섬리고로 와지다 미다비 두시에 섬다데 제자다 데네게 섬다야데 다 미다바 섬다데 제자 미다바레는 주어르고 봐 신질레 되네 규단 见了 되고마도 규단 见了마도 봐 랑원이 지 용되지 요마레 세베 딱버팀보 요마레세 두신에 섬다야다 제 미다비 두시에서 다 치와 지세도 어디 게디나 마치바지 되고마도 니미지 시루구레 SMB게 시비 두시에 줘봐나 안디게 토네 가르지워서네 저게 감숨기 되바다 마리바디 방그레스도 대지슈바 나신 지 미다바다 주어로서면도 내가 망셔라 가리워서네 녀마 데니시도 알아야 미디기 녀마 데네 알아 데네 시에서선 델리안 데누 코로나디에 지어로바다 녀마 야지 녀마디 야고 주네 데누 데데 차고게 되어 준 거로 바다 녀마도 요마 조사를 바다 6월 신설데 이내 당하는들 차과계다 당화계도 용거로 봐 차단계도 용거로 봐 제가 데니게 미다베 두시 삼냐고 스코에나 녀마리아 제베게 될야 당화계다 녀마게 중요될 차과계도 도로 차단되게 도로 해서 그러나
Looking a little further at these last two lines, among all perceptions, those of impermanence and death are the best. They eliminate all the desire, ignorance, and pride of the three realms. Starting with oneself, we naturally or innately relate to ourselves as if we are lasting, eternal. But this is not the case. For example, when we think about past events, perhaps where holidays we had, or we think of ourselves in our youth, we think of ourselves as being that same being, not recognizing that there's actually nothing lasting from who went on that particular holiday or who engaged in a particular conversation or encounter. The body and the mind has completely changed. But this is not how we relate to things. It's not how we relate to ourselves. We relate to ourselves as if we are unchanging. So this needs to be challenged, to develop a wisdom that comes to understand reality. We need to recognize that this person that we recall, whether it's ourselves or in reference to someone else, has changed. Then further, with the next line, it ties to this in that when we think, when for example, we think of something that we have experienced in the past, if it was something unwanted, something perhaps deeply unpleasant, right now, anger may arise in us. But that event's long gone. Likewise, if we think of something wonderful that's happened to us, right now, attachment can arise towards that past event, which doesn't exist anymore.
Isada dangazu midabe samda dusheta ane deniges dusheti chodore dela dine dwachada marikba doru burasade midabe samla tangwa zammi lamsa marik dwachada marikba de doayo marwa chida midabe dushe samdayo kiji yuwa rugo ba samdayo yuwa ta deni ba samla sabar chode ta gyudan jienchile dushige chude gyudan jienchile dene chungma de gyudan jienla ma de ba de yungben wa sambege de samlo chi khor di sam khorado andilma zabzajude chesada shenle modyo ba ge ga ma de ba rang ngwe ne ya de min do sambege dongban yi da wa pa de ta gwe de ta nye ru ro dine samdan do chesen do dongban yi da wa de ha ko dongban yi da wa de ha ko bo gomba le dine ne de sha da mari ba ga je do ba de se ba ya de dine shung ko ro chesa dine za chesada mida be du she shen dangbo gyunji ge den de gyudiki gyula dine chunguyo ba shenjile dine tibuti gyula dine chunguyo ba di yabu hamogo na hago ba ina dela dine dendiki namsha tige lela hago tu dendiki namsha hago lela hago tu di nomba nyi tawa doya di lela yungoro wa di yungdo ane 되샤다 말이 받아가 예디게 바가야 되 되는 중고로 받아 된다 디스고라 마다 람사 미타바 삼다와 삼지 말이 받아 되샤데 예 도리베스네 데 가보라 디드 말이요.
What needs to be understood very clearly when we look at this third line, among all perceptions, those of impermanence and death are the best. And the fourth line, they eliminate all desire, ignorance, and pride of the three realms. We should understand the deeper meaning behind this term in this context, the term here of perceptions, to understand that the starting point is to reflect on coarse impermanence, in particular in relation to this life, because that gives us a broader, more expansive outlook, an outlook that is not overwhelmed by minor problems and minor attainments. But letting go of that, the mind becomes much freer. And then one can meditate on subtle impermanence, relating to how everything that is impermanent actually changes moment by moment. So this then is the second part, to reflect on momentary change. That then is the link to a third step. Things change momentarily. So depending on what it is, one can then approach it through two ways. They change momentarily because they are dependent on causes, or they are dependent on paths. So here we use our understanding of momentary change, or subtle impermanence, to reflect on dependent arising. And when we've reflected well on dependent arising, we then can move to the fourth part, that of, because phenomena are dependent, they do not exist in the way they appear to my mind, but are empty of existing in the way that they appear to my mind. And in this way we come to an understanding of emptiness. And it's the wisdom that understands emptiness or selflessness. It is that eliminates all the desire, ignorance, and pride of the three realms. So therefore, understand when we see amongst all perceptions, those of impermanence and death are the best. This refers to because these are the starting point of the sequence of meditations. First, of coarse impermanence, then subtle impermanence, then dependent arising, and then understanding emptiness. This is how we eliminate all the desire, ignorance, and pride of the three realms.
Adine ande she so sa de shin do nyomo dang nye jue tam je jikjar do jombe towa dang gela tam je jikjar ju jubi ge ngor gyu ba la so be nga ba wo.
Lama Tsongkhapa continues, similarly, it is praised as, among other things, a hammer that destroys all mental afflictions and all faulty behaviors at once, and as a gateway to the, maybe this should rather be perhaps instantaneous accomplishment of all that is virtuous and excellent.
Then 내신도 세 단 요몽바다 예주에 탐지 직설도 준비 토와스 then 만지 ben에 토와로 지내 내디기 지게 신도다 되는게 지파 주변에 파 차네 매가서 그러와 어디나 신이다 되는게 미다비 두시다 치와다 치와 미다바다 미다비 두시데 주여바이나 안델레 되네 안지게 대시 주변에 신을 주기 예주 된비게 수림라서 봐 손용도 네 녀모바 토와나 시대 되는게 아주 넘기는 콘트롤서보다 샬리아 뇌비 자와치고나 단데 게디 칭해봐 요말 지나는 것을 기기를 제사 되는사 델리아 류아스 예주팀의 수름 숨고를 집에 수름 송에도 샬리아 뇌비게 자와치기메에서 삼로 코로나도 안데 류유관에 샬리아 뇌비게 자와미주 아유관에 샬리아 뇌바 자와미제반사 델리아는 지 차상 가고로 가용으로 제사 되는게 예주에 차상 가용으로 제사 지진 고 좀바 매바 수야 돼 토하나시리 해서죠. 아니 디나신 안 되니게 예주 된비 수름 송에도 다시 수름 삼로 코랑 개화를 와다. 지나다 예주 된비 수름 송에도 다들 융하게 줘봐들래 샹래 뇌베 자와 맞지바 샹래 팬비게 자와 중요도 되니 개화 중용으로 이제 삼로 코랑 개화 되니 류가게 주변에 개발해도 개래 탐지하는 지셔도 되니게 줍두고래 해야지 중국어로 가네. 대신도 녀모다 예주의 탐지 직절도 좀 be게 토와. 다 뒤치래 냠도시고 와다 근데 류가 요즘에 삼로날 류가 예주도 be게 수좀 송여도 안데 될이야 근데 샤네 소주기메 아는 게 준식이메 안진지도 내들에 냐바 먹고시 가용 거와 안데 디가는데 디 삼로네 코로데 류유관에 아니 나유관에 냐바시 준 참아 추수시 가용 거와 안데 저기 류유관에 안시야야 저기 미시 마침발에 발라서 바데네 류유관에 숨 이유관에 숨나서 바데네게다 미거 줄러서 바데치래 야 가고 바다 숨고로 바데네 손자다 데네기 지셔를 좀 토하나시래 해서야 디 독초라다 개와디기 주용으로 받아 류가 있음 예주 미가 주파 가요도 디 독초다 류가 있음기 개와 주디 염의 주용으로 받아.
Just before translator Kenda said, so I've changed just one word spontaneous to instantaneous because it's the same word as we have at once. So it means what? Immediate or at once or instantaneous. It's not too different from spontaneous, but maybe a little. So now to what Geshe said. Similarly, so again, this meditation on impermanence is praised as, amongst other things, a hammer that destroys all mental afflictions and all faulty behaviors at once. So the way then to understand this is that when one has reflected well on the certainty of our death and its uncertainty of its time of death, and then one will turn one's mind to the Dharma. Similarly, by reflecting on impermanence, one will also lessen one's grasping at things that have no real value, recognizing that they are fleeting, they are transitory in nature. So this meditation then turns us away from our afflictions and rather towards virtuous minds. So for example, when we've meditated well on the certainty of our death and the uncertainty of the time of death, and that when death comes, we'll either, in dependence on the karma we've created, fall to the lower realms or continue in the higher realms, when that's clear to us, we'll turn away from faulty behavior and the afflictions that motivate a faulty behavior, or it's afflictions that lead to behavior being faulty. So we'll no longer, for example, want to cause harm to others. We'll want to ensure that we do not create the negative karma that comes with physically causing harm to others or verbally causing harm to others. So therefore, we will take care of our mind. And doing this, we have here at once. At once refers to, as soon as one has this understanding, one will turn one's mind towards, for example, ethics, and all forms of ethics together in the sense of one will want to refrain from harming beings in any way, physically or verbally, and by trying to restrain our mind from coming under any of the types of afflictions. So this is what arises together. And thereby, by turning away from the mental afflictions, we also turn away from faulty behavior. But rather, and then it continues, as a gateway to the instantaneous accomplishment of all that is virtuous and excellent. Because it's not just that we turn away from non-virtue. The way one turns away from non-virtue is for one's mind to be virtuous. And therefore, instead of engaging in non-virtue, one is engaging in virtue. So in the same way that one all at once turns away from the mental afflictions and faulty behavior, one instantaneously engages in virtuous ways of thinking, so wholesome minds, and in this way accumulates merit.
Nyomo jikse jom se de yang ji rimbo de sen de mongbo sha sho so wa de yin a de churim so de lunga yisu ni je de ge ba sam da 안지 미다바 삼다 미다바 대시 슈와나지 미다바 jen gyudan kien shan la tuen den zhubi ge gyudan kien la tuen zhuba geji jiba sa midaba to midaba dele taba la tene tende ge namsha to yon de ne rashing yu tube tongba yi tube lo gomo korong gomo yo de ten de sha khong ro nga ja nyomo ba mangbo ji da nyomo thamji ge zawa dasi mari ba jin za dasi mari ba zawa dasi mari ba de le nyebo tien che tongba yi tube shero gomo yo de dasi ge nyomo thamji zawa mari ba de do yo de nyomo bachaga doru고라 진짜 직접 도 봐야지 되는지로 고쳐서 와 되니게 도 봐야 돼 남자 믿다 보고 삼아 나와 잠지 nyomo bacha doru고래서네 도 말했다 도 말했어 다 직접 도 봐야 돼 그래 남나 믿다 보고 삼다에 딜에 되네 어저게 동방이 또 별로디 안데 지게 저거 기투고 그랬어 진짜 동방이 또 별로디 어디 된 동방이 또 별로디 nyomoba 탐지게 자와 다세 마리베 님보시고 그래. 진짜 nyomoba 탐지 자와 다세 마리바데 님보치네 니 디메바서요데 nyomoba 탐지 뎁치네 메바서고 와서 직접 봐야 돼. 되네 말 샤샤간 송배 쉬어있나 그 롤이야 밥체시도 와.
Similarly, it is praised as, among other things, a hammer that destroys all mental afflictions and all faulty behaviors. So this needs to be understood in the same way as I described the third and fourth line above, that the reflection firstly on death, thereafter so coarse impermanence, thereafter on subtle impermanence, momentary change, is the second step. Neither of these lead to the destruction of all mental afflictions and all faulty behavior. But these are the indispensable building blocks for the third and fourth step, dependence arising and the wisdom realizing emptiness. And it is that final one, the wisdom realizing emptiness, that destroys all mental afflictions and faulty behaviors. So one needs to understand this at a deeper level. And moreover, at a deeper level. And then as it continues, and as a gateway to the instantaneous accomplishment of all that is virtuous and excellent. So this, the accomplishment of virtue, of all virtues, this too is cultivated in a sequence. As one develops one's understanding of the Dharma, the quality, or the quality or the strength or the purity in the sense of the less role the afflictions play in our virtue, all of this develops. So it's not instantaneous that we go from dark to light, but rather that it is a sequence. But it has as its indispensable foundation the cultivation of the coarse impermanence, so the understanding of death, and from this subtle impermanence, that things change momentarily. That leads to the reason things change momentarily is there are dependent arisings. And then that's third. And then fourthly, because they are dependent arisings, they are empty of inherent existence. With this realization of emptiness, this challenges the root cause of all our suffering, the ignorance of self-grasping. And when that is challenged, it has an impact on our afflictions. And when we weaken then our afflictions, so too do we weaken a resulting faulty behavior. And eventually, this realization of emptiness will be sufficient that it cuts our ignorance, eradicates our ignorance. And not only is when our ignorance then is eradicated, nothing can result from ignorance because it's been eradicated. Therefore, no afflictions can arise ever again, nor will faulty behavior ever follow. So there is a sequence, but it starts with this indispensable realization of impermanence.
야야 섬다데 되니 기지기 지비기 된 미다바 참모되게 두스진하고 진하고도 미다바 참모되게 하고 발래 때네 디네 다음에 봤도 동방이 또 비게 로디 교가 제토야다 동방이 또 로디 공발래 때네 아니 녀모바 탐지게 자와 다세 마리베 님보치네 디방요도 아니 녀모바 탐지 직사도 뒤질 봐 매버서 투야게 두스진 용고레스 디네 제도다 녀모바 탐지 빵비에 빵요도 디네 게레 띵예 대와 게 탐지 주 용고레스 사실 나다디 디네게 봐 찍찍래 띵네 두스진 용고레스 사실 차고르다 나 남사데 나님보 띵네 신세로.
So the very essence of what we've looked at this afternoon is we started to look at the benefits of reflecting on or being mindful of death. So this is a meditation whose importance cannot be exaggerated, because the first result that comes from living with this understanding that our death is certain, but its time of death is uncertain, this turns us then towards what is of greater value. And it turns us away from what has deceived us thus far. It turns us away from striving for, our mind being dominated by attaining the pleasures of this life, these pleasures and excellences that have no real value. And it also turns us away from being perturbed by the mundane problems and difficulties of this life. That's the foundation that then ensures that we are ready to strive to accumulate the causes for future lives, to have that as what dominates our way of thinking as we go about our everyday life. Then, in dependence on that, we will start to be ready to focus on a greater goal, a goal even greater than ensuring a further excellent rebirth, namely liberation. Because then we'll be ready with a mind that is focused on accomplishing virtue and is not being so overwhelmed by afflictions and desires and so forth. We'll be then ready to reflect on subtle impermanence, and from subtle impermanence, dependence arising, recognizing that everything that is impermanent changes momentarily because it's dependent on causes, because it's dependent on parts. Then, as we become ever more familiar with dependence arising, that meditation which came out in dependence on the prior meditation of subtle impermanence, which itself came about in dependence on the accumulation of extensive virtue, which came about in dependence on the prior meditation of the impermanence of this life, we then have sufficient causes accumulated to actually engage in the final direct antidote, the wisdom realizing emptiness, recognizing that because all impermanent phenomena change momentarily, they are dependence arisings, dependence on causes, dependence on parts. Therefore, being dependent, they cannot exist independently. They cannot exist by way of their own nature or essence. Therefore, they are empty of existing independently, empty of existing in the way they appear. And this is how we then come to realize emptiness. And it's this realization of emptiness which is the actual antidote that eliminates desire, ignorance, pride, and so forth. So these stages of training are cultivated in a particular sequence. They are dependent arisings. In dependence on the cultivation of the correct cultivation of the prior steps, we will be able to correctly cultivate the latter steps. So these qualities that we cultivate within, they too are dependent arisings. They too are empty. So we can conclude therefore this afternoon, but if you have questions, then there certainly is time. Then thank you. And thank you, we'll conclude there.